This is my new PC. No matter if I'm playing AAA titles at 4K, competitive FPS, doing 3D rendering, music production or video and photo editing, this will handle it, and I will take you with me on this PC building journey. At the heart of the system is the latest generation Ryzen 7 9800X3D. It has 8 Zen 5 cores with 3D cache for gaming, but still enough multi-core performance for creative workloads. For the GPU I picked this Aorus RTX 5080 Master Ice, which comes with a tasteful amount of RGB on the card and even on the fans, an LCD display for GIFs or system information, and a heatsink so big that it could cool a 5090. The system is equipped with a total amount of 64GB of RAM with Hynix memory chips at 6000 megatransfers a second at CL30 in the form of these Corsair Dominator Titanium. Even though this is an Intel XMP kit, it runs stable at full speed in my system. The base for the system is this white and silver X870E Aorus Pro Ice. Dual USB 4 on the rear I/O is standard for this platform, so you can connect external high-speed SSDs or a dock. It offers PCIe Gen 5 for storage and graphics with certain rules from the chipset and solid heatsinks for VRMs and M.2 SSDs all around. Cooling and RGB will mostly be handled by this, an iCue Link system hub. You can connect 7 devices to each channel and control the RGB lights, fan or pump speeds. In my case, just one hub is enough to control the whole system. You can connect your series of fans either with some stud connectors, which you plug into the fans itself, or a cable to connect some longer runs to another fan or hub through the case. You still need 2 mainboard USB cables for the hub and LCD screen, and a PCIe power cable for powering the hub. This adds a few cables to the system, but it's still minimal compared to messy regular RGB wiring from a few years ago. The case defines the overall look of any PC, and if you like to have a look at your components, the Lian O11 Vision is definitely the best pick while still maintaining a roughly standard PC shape. You get 3 tempered glass side panels, all meeting at the top right corner of the case, held together by magnets. The build is solid with thick metal all around and a fair bit of modularity and quality of life improvements. You can offset the mainboard tray, remove hard drive cages and relocate cable channels at the back. All in all, you get a very good case for the price. So with the introduction of our parts done, let us start with the main part, the building process. Open the socket cover for the CPU and just gently drop the processor into the socket with no force and wiggle it around a bit to ensure correct placement. Fixate it with the bracket and then push down the lever gently. The socket cover will pop out and you can throw it back into the mainboard box. And next up is the beloved thermal paste application. A pea-sized drop of thermal paste should be enough for your regular Ryzen CPU. There are multiple ways of applying thermal paste, but I just spread it evenly across the IHS with the spatula that came with my thermal paste tube. If you have a set of 2 sticks of RAM, then you usually populate slot number 2 and number 4 from the left side to ensure dual channel, the best speeds and stability, but since I have a set of 4, I will fill all my slots. Open the levers on the DIMM slots and push evenly from the top until you hear a click or the levers are back in their initial state. Unlike with mainboards from a few years ago, most modern premium boards like this one are fully toolless. Just rotate the latch of the M.2 heatsink and you can slide in your NVMe drive. You don't need any tiny screws for the drive anymore. Just turn the latch on the mounting point and you are done with it. But if you want to install more than one PCIe Gen 5 drive, then you have to put the second one into a reinforced metal slot. But then your GPU will lose 8 Gen 5 lanes, because it has to share the lanes with your drives going directly to the CPU. I just have a secondary Gen 4 drive, so to avoid this I simply connect it to the regular slot. So let's mount the mainboard in the case now. I wish the board had a backplate to protect the soldering points and add some rigidity, but it does not, so you have to be careful to not scrape any components with the mainboard mounting points. To mount the power supply, just swing open the cable management door of the case and insert the PSU. The mount is rather special. Firstly, it's getting held in place sideways and mid-air with a brace, and secondly, the connectors are on the side of the power supply to allow for easier access. We plug in PCIe power for the iCue Link hub first, and then followed by custom cable mod cables in white with silver accents for dual CPU power, quadruple PCIe power to 12V 2x6 just to be safe, and then lastly mainboard power. On the mainboard side of things, we can already plug in both 8-pin cables for our CPU power and the 24-pin cable for our mainboard power. And lastly, the all-in-one front panel connector from the case. Up next is the iCue Link system for our cooling and RGB. The case features a very convenient removable radiator and fan bracket on which we can mount our 360mm AIO. The first cable connects to the bottom intake fans. The 3 radiator fans are plugged into each other, and the last cable connects to the rear exhaust fan. The AIO pump mounts to the regular base plate of the mainboard. Just evenly tighten the screws in a crisscross pattern until the pump sits firmly on the CPU and you cannot move it anymore. To power the pump, we plug in an iCue Link cable first and then a USB-C cable for the LCD screen. If you offset your mainboard tray to the lower position, then you can mount 2 rear exhaust fans, but I have it in the regular position and can therefore only mount 1. For cable management, hiding the cable up here is a little harder. The last set of fans is the bottom intake, which once again comes with a removable bracket to make the installation easier and can fit up to 3 140mm fans. There is a removable dust filter going the full length of the intake fans to make dust maintenance much easier. To mount the fan bracket, just slot it in, line up with the holes and secure it with the 2 screws. This will be the last cable we need in the interior. This results in only 2 cables from the fans and AIO to connect to the hub, along with PCIe power and USB-C to the mainboard to configure fan curves and RGB with the hit or miss Corsair iCue software. We have reached the last component, which is the graphics card. With each generation they seem to become bigger and bigger, and for this one we need to remove 3 PCIe slot covers. Even though it's such a long and heavy card, it doesn't really need an anti-sag bracket to stay level. Gigabyte did a pretty good job with structural design. We are reaching the end of the building process, and after working in the case and with the iCue Link system, I have to say it was very easy to build in and route cables creatively to make it clean. Now just enjoy the last step of the case assembly and then the beautiful RGB montage. Some benchmarks in Cyberpunk 2077 and Counter-Strike 2, with the system at stock settings first and then undervolted and overclocked after. Let's start with the built-in benchmark in Cyberpunk. At stock, CPU and GPU power consumption is very consistent at around 61 and 345 watts respectively. We get 56 FPS for our 1% loss and an average of 63 for the whole benchmark run. This is the same benchmark but now with an undervolted and overclocked CPU and GPU. Power draw again is pretty stable at around 70 watts for the 9800X3D and 381 watts for the 5080. FPS are obviously a little higher now with an average of 67 FPS and 62 FPS for 1% lows. For this 6% increase in average FPS we need to draw more power, specifically 14% more power or 9 watts for the processor and 10% or 36 watts more for the graphics card. 9800X3D is already such an efficient processor that adding 9 watts of power is basically insignificant to the cooling. The increase in power draw for the GPU is more substantial though, and smaller designs might not be able to handle so much power easily. In the end, you have to decide if the increase in FPS is worth the increase in power draw. Next up is a 45-minute long gaming test with the undervolted and overclock configuration. The GPU is consuming around 367 watts and pretty quickly reaches a stable temperature of around 72 degrees. The CPU temperature behaves differently. Since we got an AIO, the coolant first has to saturate with a consistent heat load, in this case roughly 70 watts, which takes around 30 minutes or so. Eventually the CPU reaches a stable temperature of around 69 degrees Celsius. The decline in temperature is also way slower for the processor compared to the regular air cooling of the graphics card. And last but not least, the idle power consumption amounts to 28 and 26 watts. For some contrast, I picked a second game with a lower resolution and higher frame rates to compare to the behavior of AAA titles. The CPU consumes just 1 or 2 more watts at stock compared to Cyberpunk and shows a pretty consistent graph unlike the GPU power consumption. This benchmark is testing performance in regular situations with higher frame rates and also moments with a lot of grenades and particles, which drastically decrease your FPS in-game. That's why the GPU power draw sways from 190 to 250 watts. If we use our undervolted and overclocked settings, the whole graph basically just shifts upwards again. The most important thing we can extract from this graph is that we gain 20 to sometimes even 40 FPS at the lower end, for a small power increase of roughly 9 and 20 watts for the CPU and GPU. These moments with lower FPS are when the most action is happening in game and where you need your frames the most, so dipping below your monitor refresh rate is the worst case scenario. Also, if you have crazy high frame rates like 700 or 900 with big dips, I would recommend capping your FPS at maybe 480 to get more consistent frame times and less stutters because your GPU has a little more time to breathe. This concludes my performance testing, and if you found this video fun and informative, consider subscribing. Especially if you want to know how to quickly undervolt and overclock your Ryzen 9000 series CPU and RTX 5000 series GPU. I'll post these two videos in the coming days after this one, so stay tuned. Thank you and auf Wiedersehen.